another show of the Cromwell Sports Chronicles. I am your host, Lane Cromwell. I'm excited that you have clicked on our show and decided to enjoy what we have to offer. And I do appreciate you making us a part of your day. Thank you. I am excited today. We have an awesome guest. And for those of you who are new to our show, I do just want to drive home the point. The reason that I created this show is I wanted to hear people's stories. I wanted to hear all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of different types of stories. We've had football players, cyclists, we've had some basketball people, and today we're going to dive into something new. So I invite you to come along for the journey. And I'm going to introduce our next guest. Pretty influential guy in my life, and somebody that I grew up with, and I'll just introduce him, Andy Cromwell. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing, Lane?
Hey, I'm doing good. And yes, if you recognize that we have the last same name, that's because we are brothers. Andy's my older brother, and he was a good big brother for all of those of you who were wondering, but we are going to jump right in to the show because Andy has a very diverse sports background. He was pretty much good at everything he did, and so I wanted to talk today to him to bring him on and try to get some of those stories out. But Andy, is I do with all my guests, tell us just a little bit about where you grew up, some of your first experiences, whether it was with sports or running, and maybe an influence or two that you remember growing up.
Yeah, sure. So first off, being called an awesome guest is great, but I was listening to one of your other podcasts and you said one of your neighbors was one of your favorite people. So as your brother, I'm a little bit hurt, but I'll let it slide this time.
Easy. If we're going to bring the chops out, okay. We can bring the chops out.
Your brother should be one of your favorite people, but that's all right. Hopefully I'll make it up to you in this next 20 minutes.
Yeah, so. Favorite goes below blood. That's for sure.
That's right. So, I think for you to say that I was good at everything, I'd probably put myself more on average at everything. So I think the thing that sets, many people could probably relate to is as the old guys say, back in my day, you didn't spend all year doing one sport 12 months out of the year as much time as you could put on the field. You actually just were really diverse in a bunch of different sports and tried to do it the best you could. But when football season was over, you played baseball. When baseball was over, you played soccer and so on. And I actually still to today try to get my kids a little experience in about at least 2 or 3 sports before they pick out what sport they want to try to be really good at, because I think it's important to have a variety. So, my early years spent doing a lot of about anything I could find. I didn't do a lot of running, but obviously I was, like you said, athletic in many different things.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk a little bit about running. Do you remember, I know in middle school they had what was called a fun run, but do you ever remember kind of the first race you ran?
Yeah, I do. So essentially, you're right. They'd load up all these kids from the junior high, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade onto a bus, and they drop them out in the middle of nowhere. And they pretty much say, if you want to get home today, you got to run to the finish line. And I didn't have a lot of experience in running. And I remember thinking a lot of the kids didn't think it was cool to run fast. They just wanted to walk it or jog it. And it was funny. I didn't take it too serious in 6th grade. But as I was getting off of the school bus, I remember seeing the school bus driver had put this little plaque up on his bus, which is funny. But right as I got off the bus, I read the sign and it said, winners never quit and quitters never win. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not going to quit today. I'm just going to go for it. And I didn't know, there was a lot of 7th and 8th graders there, and they didn't place you based on the school. It was based on your grade, and somehow I won my 6th grade fun run race. And so then 7th grade came around, and it was a little bit of pride for me, because I had won, and I won it again. And then in 8th grade, there was a duel between me and one of my best friends who really wanted to beat me, and I pulled it out right towards the end. So that was kind of my first experience with running, and obviously drew some attention from the high school cross country coach who came knocking after I won all 3 of those races.
Just for future reference, who was it that you beat at the end?
Well, I mean, the name was Doug Roberts.
Oh, okay.
So
All
yeah,
right. You never
he
know. We might
he
have him on the show down the road.
yeah he was a great athlete, way better at basketball than me, and I never could compete with him in basketball. But that day, that day was my day, I guess. And I remember we raced it all the way to the finish, and they were even in the newspaper article that they ran in the Press and Citizen, showed a picture of me with Doug right on my right neck and neck coming in for the finals. So it was a great race, and I guess I came out on top.
That's awesome. Um, so the high school coach was there. Who was that coach?
Last name was Kissinger
Oh,
at the time.
not Henry. I don't remember his first name either. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so you get into high school. At what point in high school did you say maybe this running thing is for me?
Yeah, so that's the tough part about high school, right? Is you got
Yeah.
to start making decisions on what do I want to do. And you know the popular thing to do in high school in the fall is obviously play football.
Yeah.
Winter time is basketball, and then I think running kind of takes a priority more in the spring with track and stuff like that, depending on what school you're in. So um, I I I I knew I was good at running, and the cross country coach really schmoozed me. So I said I'm going to give it a shot at my freshman year, and I had a good year, and I won't get too far into that, but I wasn't the best on my team. But freshmen boys rarely are. There's a big difference in physical abilities between a freshman boy and a senior boy, and but I made varsity and did all right. But I still decided after my freshman year, the cross country coach left, and I thought, I think I'd rather play the popular sport of football. So my sophomore year, I tried out for football, made the JV team, and was having what I thought was a good year. And had been 3 or 4 games in. I played safety, had a couple interceptions, and thought I was a starting safety. And I still to this day don't know what I did or if I said something or did something. But the coaches benched me for the last 3 games. I never played 1 minute of the last 3 games of our season. And me being a little bit prideful and non-forgiving said that's the last time I play football. I'm going to go run cross country next year because I can control everything about
Right.
cross country. Nobody can tell me whether I'm playing or whether I'm not. I get on there. If I run slow, I'm the slowest guy on the team. If I'm the fastest guy, then nobody can tell me I'm not. And I said, that was probably the moment that I committed myself fully to cross country in high school, was after I got benched in football for no apparent reason. Of course, maybe there was something, I just never was made aware of it.
Oh, I love stories like this. Well, let me ask you this. I actually remember going to a ton of cross country meets to watch you and again another brother in between us, Jeff. But you ran track and cross country. Do you have a preference between the two? Was there one that was more enjoyable or fit your athletic ability more?
Yeah, cross country always fitted me better. I just didn't like running circles. I mean, you felt kind of like, the rat in the experiment or the gerbil running on the treadmill. You're like, what am I doing? I'm running in circles and I'm counting laps. And I kind of liked the scenery portion of cross country, and not being able to see how far you always are behind. You can always see everybody on a track, and sometimes that can be discouraging. So I did well at track, but I did enjoy cross country far more just because it was a change of scenery.
Wow. Well, I remember taking a 2-hour drive in the back of our car and going to a small town called Ryrie, Idaho, to go to a cross-country meet. It's right outside of Idaho Falls, for those who aren't familiar with Idaho, Utah area. But I remember that, at least as a spectator, being one of the worst experiences because it was windy, it was cold, I was miserable. Do you maybe either have a favorite or a worst experience that you remember from a cross-country meet?
Well, first off, maybe we'll touch that a little later, because my experience as a spectator has been, if you're cold and miserable, it's because you're not running around enough cheering on the runners. So if you're running around as much as they do, you're probably warm and a little bit sweaty yourself as a spectator. So, but we can touch that later. As far as, I'm actually getting old, and so I don't always remember everything about running. But outside of high school, I actually ran a marathon in St. George, which probably related. That was probably my worst experience if you're talking about running, um, and it was just, I mean, mainly because I remember running. I always tell this story, but I remember running this marathon for my first time. And you really try to train on splits, so you want to try to really pace yourself, and the hardest thing to do is to slow yourself down in the beginning because you're feeling so good and amped up and you're ready to go and you've been training, and so, but you got to run a little slower than what you're prepared to do in order to make it the 26 miles that you got to go. Well, I fell into that trap of thinking I felt better, and for the first 19 miles, I for the first 19 miles, I kept looking at my watch and calculating in my head that if I kept that pace, how fast I'd run the marathon. And I was blowing my time away. And then about mile 19 is where I hit what they call the wall. And then I
Oh,
started looking at my watch, trying to calculate how slow I could run the last 7 minutes and still make it in under 4 hours. And that was how I gauged the last 7 miles of that race. And even at the very end, I turned the corner for the final stretch and thought I'd be able to see the finish line, but the street kind of has a natural curve to it, so you have to run a little uphill before you can see the finish line. And I was so frustrated, I stopped and walked for a minute, and some poor old lady on the side sitting in her lawn chair because we were in town, said,
oh.
she was cheering and she was like, "Come on, you can do it," and clapping. And I looked over, I said, "Well, then you get out here and do it if you're so ready to go." And I just snapped at her because I was just done, man. And the final part of that story was they make you wear this little chip on your shoe and that goes on your laces, and I
Oh,
had
they can
never,
track you.
right, your time, and I
Yeah.
had never worn one of those. So I thought maybe it would fall off if my shoe came untied. So I unlaced my shoe halfway, put the chip on there, and then I laced up my shoe just to make sure it was good, not knowing that I'd need to give that back. And so then I get to the finish line after snapping at that poor old lady, and I'm
No,
exhausted, I'm done, and the lady
no.
goes, "Hey, good job. We need to get that chip. Can you pull that off?" And I bent over and I couldn't even hardly touch my shoes, and I couldn't undo my shoelaces, and I just started bawling like a baby. And so the lady took my shoe and unlaced it and pulled it off, and then I went over shamelessly and just fell in the grass and cried and wept because, and needless to say, I haven't run a marathon since. So if you're looking for this ultra marathoner on your podcast, I'm definitely not the guy, but I do enjoy running. So
Wow. So somebody's grandma took the brunt of that quick discussion.
That's correct. She's probably still telling that story to people, how she doesn't watch the St. George Marathon anymore
What's your-
because people just yell at her all the time.
Well, and for those who don't run, just real quick, I remember running track in American Fork, and my coach said, "Hey Lane, why don't you jump in and run the 400?" I have never felt so good for the first 300 meters. I was in first place. The wall is what your body decides to do when it's not ready
Right.
to exert that any more kind of, fuel. And I ended up, I want to say, 7th or 8th place. It's the worst feeling in the world. So to hit the wall at mile 19 and still have to go 7 miles is mentally, physically brutal. So kudos.
Yeah, thanks. Pretty much the only time I even ran a half decent pace was when my family was at the bottom of the hill and I hurried and sped up like it looked like I was running. The minute I looked back and saw they went to the car, I started walking again. So
Oh man.
it was miserable.
Well, that's a good story, and I know at least probably one of the things that's coming next. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show is even though we're family, sometimes you don't always hear the details or even the actual stories because of 4 or 5 year age difference. Something happened in Pocatello at a race that we discussed a little bit, and I don't think I had all the details, and I think our listeners would love to hear Red Hills Classic, which is what they called the race in Pocatello. What do you remember about what happened at that race?
Well, it's kind of funny. I was just back up in Idaho this weekend and had my 15-year-old son with me, and we were in Pocatello, and I decided to divert, and I actually visited the park where we did it, um, just to kind of refresh the memory, make sure it wasn't one of those made-up things. But um, so essentially, one of the harder courses we raced in cross country was in Pocatello, and the reason it was so tough was because it was in a park, but the park had some major hills, and most all the running was either on grass or on dirt trails. And so, anytime you're running on a road, it's maybe a little harder on your legs than grass, but grass is squishy and it's hard to really propel yourself. So, and it was just a lot of uphill and downhill. So we had showed up to race. I think this was my senior year, and we had a good team, and we were a bunch of friends and buddies, and the Preston football team was playing that night, I think up in Shelley, if I remember right, which is about an hour north. So
Right.
we had this plan in our minds that if we could get our race done in Pocatello, we had arranged for maybe the student bus to pick us up in Pocatello and take us to the game, because back then, you could hop the student bus, go to the game, cheer, ride the bus back. I mean, you're mostly there for the girls more than the football, but we said it was for the football. So, but to do that, this race was in the afternoon on a Friday, and we had to get done early enough to catch that bus. So, we convinced our coach at the time that we all wanted to run the JV race instead of the varsity race. And she didn't really want us to, but she said fine. She understood. So we all went and signed up for the JV race. And of course, we're a bunch of varsity runners, which probably wasn't that fun for the true JV guys, because we took off and
Whirlwind.
we ran that course, and I think I probably could have walked the last half mile and still won the race, because that's how far ahead I was. And I ran it. I thought I ran it as hard as I could, because I promised my coach I'd run it as hard as I could, and I won that race. And our team did great, of course, and we all got done. So we're standing there waiting. We needed the girls to run next, so we were cheering them on in the JV race. And while that race was going on, my dad, or our dad, I guess I should say, who's
Either way, sure.
famous for bribery, I guess is the way to put it.
Motivational
He
bribery.
right, he started putting this bug in our ear that he didn't think we could run. He started telling us we probably couldn't have run with the varsity guys, and that's why we ran the JV, and we denied it. And he started giving us a bad time, and he said, if you guys ran that varsity race, I'd be so impressed. I'd probably take y'all for hamburgers, and I'd drive you to Shelley so you don't have to ride up on the bus, and then you can ride home on the bus. I thought, wow. I mean, we'd get there quicker. We could get hamburgers. So
Right.
we all agreed we were going to now stay and run the varsity race, which is another 5K.
That's right.
So we all got in line. We were joking around. We were, and the gun goes off and we all start. Now these guys, these varsity guys, these are, I mean, some of these were Pocatello High, which was at the time bigger than us, and a lot of these schools, I think Idaho Falls might have been here, which at the time was a bigger school than us. So
Right.
there was
Legit
some,
classification wise, they were big. We had 800, they had thousands.
right. So I mean, I wasn't going to win this race no matter what happens. So, we were kind of just taking it. We just needed to finish. That was all the deal was, or I don't even think he said finish. So we started running, and somewhere about a mile in, I just, I was always so competitive. I couldn't quit. And I'd look back, and pretty soon I noticed that some of the guys who started the race with me are cheering for me. I'm like, what? You quit? Like, these guys are standing on the sidelines now. And I'm like, what's going on? Why am I still running? But I was too proud to stop. And there's this section on the course that the spectators can watch you, but there's a section on the course where you run out kind of in this desert through a bunch of weeds. People can't see you. You run in through some trees, and it's probably half mile, 3/4 of a mile of the course, so nobody really can see where you're running. Well, my dad just happened to be standing right where you enter that section, and he saw that I was just running pretty slow and just trying to like finish the race. And he said to me, he goes, "Hey, I'll give you $1 for every person you pass." And
Oh, baby.
me being the stupid kid
Oh,
I was
baby.
and desperate for $10, started
That's
passing
right.
kids. And by the time I came out of the trees 3/4 of a mile later, I had passed 20 kids. I was up $20, and I was running as hard as I could go. Now on my 5th mile or 6th mile of running,
Right.
and came in and finished the race. And, I don't even know what place I got in that race. But the thing that I almost got disqualified from running in regionals and states because we weren't aware that you can be disqualified from that for running a JV and a varsity race all in the same days. And they had to petition to get my eligibility back to run at state. But the thing, I guess, that went down in folklore that everybody seemed so impressed, and my cross country coach t- was so impressed with, told everybody at the awards banquet, was that I actually ran the second race faster than the first race. So that was the big thing, is that
Wow.
they could not believe that I had a faster time in the second 5K than I did the first, after winning the first one by a lengthy stride. So,
Wow.
so that's the story, and you know,
I
I
know
don't
you're
know
an
how much
avid
of it is
fisherman.
true. Yeah.
Right.
I don't
Is
know
that
how
a
much
fish
of it is
story?
true or how much of it is a fish story, but there's a lot of truth in there, with probably some, you'd have to interview 3 or 4 other people and put it all together for what the real story probably is.
Well, either way, that's pretty dang impressive. That's a great story. I don't know if I've heard all the details like that of that story. That's awesome. One last question. Did you ever consider running in college? Like on
Nope.
a scholarship? Or and
No.
what people who are listening need to understand is, we were at a school where there was really a sport or two. It's not like today where there's mountain biking and swimming, and we didn't have that. It was one or two things per season. That was the choice. But you're saying, Was cross country in college? It's huge now. Was it big back then, or do you remember?
I got a few letters from junior colleges to come and try,
Oh,
but
okay.
I Lane, I've never been in love with running, and that's what I've learned over
Right.
time. I'm in love with competing, and
Right.
nowadays, if I decide to run, I don't compete against other people like I used to. I compete against myself. I ran a half marathon last year in St. George, and I'm just trying to talk myself into doing it again this year. But if I do it, the only reason I do it isn't for the love of running, it's because I want to beat my time. So it's more about competitive to me. And, it's funny, a couple of my kids both ran cross country and had fairly good careers as well. But both of them would have said the same thing, is like, when you're done, you're done. It takes a real special person to say, man, I love this stuff. I want to go do it for 4 more years. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Do you know what time it is?
6:34.
Nope. It's time for America's favorite game.
Oh boy.
Do
Jeez, come
you
on.
know? Here we go. I'm going to give you two options for the game today. And for those of you who don't know, we ask some questions. We see if our guests actually know
Oh
some of their
boy.
favorite things. So I will let you pick. The first topic is actually the 1991 State of Idaho Cross Country State Championship. Or you can choose your favorite football team, who is the Pittsburgh Steelers. What topic would you like to do for Do You Know?
I want to see what you dug up on cross country. So I'll take
All right,
that.
here we go. First question. These are not easy, but I'm going to try to come with a softball. Do you remember your senior year, what place you got at state?
4th.
Okay. Softball City, we're going to take it up a notch. All right, here we go. I don't know why I just kicked over to Donald Trump there. Sorry.
The question is, did you know that?
I did know that, actually.
Oh, okay.
I did know that. Did you have any friends that didn't go to your school that were in that cross country race that finished, we'll say, in the top 10?
I mean, friends in the sense that they ran cross country and I knew them and I
Yes.
raced against them often, yes.
Can you name them?
I know one's name was Dustin.
Okay.
I don't know his last
Okay,
name.
you're in sixth place was Dustin Coles from Ryrie, Idaho.
That's correct.
I want to say you had a friend, maybe a hint is Soda
So,
Springs.
yeah, there's one from Soda Springs. I can see his face. He even wore glasses when he ran.
Yep.
And I can't remember his name.
He has the same name as it's the same name as one of your brothers.
Oh, Jeff. That's right.
Jeff Horsley. Jeff Horsley, who finished 5th, both of them right behind you. Now, did you ever know somebody from Marsh Valley? Or maybe
why you got to take a positive and turn it into a negative like this?
What? Does Ryan Howe ring a bell?
Yeah, it does. Why?
Oh. Well, those were the 3 names I remember was Dustin, Jeff, and then Ryan Howe. Don't ask me how I remember that.
So here's the funny story. At that state race, that was probably, man, that thing was miserable. But it turned out good. But for some reason, that was up in Lewiston, Idaho. They started the race about
Is that on the beach?
200 yards of sand to start the race. And if you've ever ran in sand, oh my gosh, it's miserable. Well, obviously everyone else didn't have as bad a time as I did, because I came out of the sand after 200 yards with and I think I was in front of about 10 kids out of like 200. And so I spent almost 2.5 miles passing people nonstop. If I had had $1 for every kid I passed, I probably would have had $150. That's all I did all race was pass kids. With about a half mile to go, I didn't even know what place I was in because I had no clue where the front was. I didn't even know anymore. I was just running to pass, and all of a sudden, with about a half mile to go, I come up on Dustin from Ryrie and Jeff from Soda Springs. Funny thing is, I had never beat Dustin, and I haven't ever beat Jeff from Soda Springs. Or I had beat him once or twice, but usually in our local meets, he got the best of me because he was a faster sprinter than me. We'd always get to the end, and he'd sprint and beat me. And I knew that. And with a half mile to go, I hung on to their back for about 15 seconds. And I said, I don't have a lot of time. They're going to beat me on the sprint. And as I passed them, I said, later, guys. And I just took off as fast as I could go. And I just ran for my life because I knew they were coming behind me and they were running. And I go, you had to run around this and do this big U. So you run down this length of trees, you turn around these trees, and you come back uphill to the finish. And I knew they were just running right after me. I think you said they got 5th and 6th, right?
Yeah, Ryan from Marshville. You didn't mention him. He finished
Well,
with
that part's coming.
16. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
that part's coming. So I ran around that, and I come around the corner, and I can see I got a lead on these guys, and I am so happy because I'm like, man, I'm gonna make it. And that was I was so worried about who was behind me that I hadn't looked in front of me. And just as with about 100 yards to go, I look up, and about 25 yards ahead of me is that Ryan kid from Marsh Valley who's never beat me. And I'm like, what the heck? Where is this coming from? And I never could catch him, but at least once I focused on him to try to catch him, at least I got my mind off of being beat, and I ended up 4th, so I really couldn't complain. But it's always been awesome that I think about beating those two and that I finally beat them when it really counted. The damper on the whole race was always the fact that I probably should have had 3rd because the kid who got 3rd had never beat me before in his life, and that kind of always annoyed me. So anyway.
Well, that actually leads into the other 2 questions that I have for our Do
Okay.
You Know? Do you know what place your team got? And for those who don't know, as people finish, they accumulate points. Do you remember what place your team, Preston, got?
I was going to say 3rd.
162 points. They actually ended up in 5th.
5th, yeah. Which, I will tell you, I'd ran cross country my freshman year. We did have a team go to state. I don't even think we placed. My sophomore year, we didn't even really have a team. My junior year, I was the only person to go to state from the whole team. We didn't even have enough to field a team my junior year. And so I had recruited a bunch of kids because I had placed at state my junior year and got a state medal. And I think that a little bit of hardware was a little easier to recruit people, and got a bunch of my friends to run. So 5th place might not sound like much, but for a school that didn't even field a team the last almost 3 years, we were pretty proud of that. And I think it kind of led into some building in the long run for Preston. So.
Well, it totally did. Last question. Do you remember the time you finished?
No, but I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing about cross country, right? Track's one thing. You can go for your times, and you can always compare times in cross country on the same course, but times fluctuate depending on how many uphills, downhills. Track's even, so no matter where you go, the track's the same. But so times vary on those cross country courses, but I'm figuring I was probably somewhere in the low 17s, high 16s, maybe.
16:56.
There you go.
Jeff Horsley, who you would never beat, finished 6 seconds behind you, and Dustin was 1 second behind him.
I knew those suckers were close. I knew it. I've never looked at those times, but man, that makes me nervous just thinking about it. And that was a long time ago.
And just for the record, it took some digging to find that information. It was in a Priest River catalog somewhere that I found, and I was like, "Oh, I finally found it." So that was entertaining to say the least. So,
Hey, well, if you
oh
can
man.
ever dig up my senior year track 2 mile time and 1 mile time, I'd love to have those because it's kind of a faint memory. I've looked and looked. I can't ever find my times on those. So
I'll
you
look
get
it
some
up for
extra.
sure.
Thanks, man.
Well, thanks for playing Do You Know? We'll
Yeah.
wrap up with just a couple more questions. You mentioned having kids that run.
Hmm.
That's got to be a hard thing as people transition in life from, again, a lot of ex-players who maybe coach or those kind of things. Some people, it drives them crazy and they struggle with it. Where do you stand as far as, hey, I used to run and now I've got to sit on the sideline and watch my kid run? What's that experience like?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed watching my kids run. Um, I mean, I enjoyed if they decide to play soccer. I've coached them in soccer, but it is a little different because again, obviously not as much as in your control, right? You're just there to cheer and root them on and give them all that you can, but at the end of the day, it all just depends on how hard they've worked, how hard they've conditioned, how much energy they've got left in the tank. And I've so that's the hardest part. And you know that they're running a team sport. Many people think of cross country as this individual sport, but it actually is probably one of my favorite sports, whether I did it or my kids did it, with regards to just team unity. The teams just they love hanging out. They have a great time. They all go to these meets and they park it under a tent and they make friends. And whether you're a good runner or bad runner, but it does up the pressure when your kids are relied on to, just like any other sport. And so that's the hardest part to cheer for. But I have enjoyed watching them run. I've been through good times and bad times. I've seen my kids run and hurt and getting. I think my daughter, her freshman year, made state. We were so proud of her, and then she got a little hurt before she went, and she got second to last in state. And I pretty much just coaxed her in as much as I could as a dad, knowing that she was in pain. And then, but I've also, like I said, been at other meets where my kid was expected to get seventh on his team as a freshman and ended up third on the team and really helped him out and was a hero. And so it's the up and down of sports, but that's what keeps you coming back. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most, and the saying I've enjoyed the most with cross country and being a spectator, I saw at a state meet, a parent was wearing a shirt once that said, cross country, the only sport where the spectators run. And I thought, it's true. That's probably the funnest part. When I show up to a course as a parent, I'm I probably know the course better than they do because I'm trying to map out all the places I can run and cut the course to get to cheer for them, because I want to try to get as many spots as I can. But by the time I'm done, I'm more sore than they are the next day. So it is fun in that sense.
Oh man. Well, this has been an awesome show, and maybe just to end it, if you had a high school kid listening, or maybe a parent of a new cross country runner, would you give them any advice or any thoughts about? Oh, I don't want to put pressure on as far as success, but any general advice of how to make it a good experience?
Well, I think what I would say is, for the same reason, the beauty of cross country, which is probably one of those sports that is way down the list of what kids want to do, I would encourage your kids to do it. You know, my oldest son never wanted to run cross country, never considered running. He wanted to play soccer. He grew up playing soccer. That's all he really wanted to do. He went to try out for the high school soccer team, and I even think he was good enough to make it. I just think there was a lot of politics involved, and
As
he
there
didn't
always
make it.
is.
And
Yep.
you know, and I always told myself I wasn't going to be that dad that bribed coaches to get my kid on, because at the end of the day, those kids probably don't play anyway. And so I just, you know, when he didn't make it, he was super bummed, and he didn't want to run. I told him, you should run cross country, because nobody can tell you if you made the team or not. Nobody can tell you that you're not good enough. You go out and run as hard as you can. They don't rarely cut anybody from cross country teams. Yet
That's
you'll
right.
make some friends. You get to hang out. You're not there to win every race. You're there to just run it better than you did last week or the week before. And, you know, we had some kids on his team that were not good runners. They were not, but, you know, over the course of a season, they'd improve their 5K time by 3 to 4 minutes a mile, or sorry, 3 to 4 minutes a race,
Right.
which, you know, and they still weren't winning. They still weren't even the top of their JV, but what a confidence booster to a kid. And I've never seen a kid. I think in cross country, the kid who gets first and the kid who gets last gets about the same applause from the crowd. You know, it doesn't matter whether you win or you're last, everybody's cheering for you. And I think that that's what makes cross country special. The rest of the story is my son didn't want to play cross country. I told him, listen, or sorry, he didn't want to run. I told him, you know, you don't have a choice. You're not going to do nothing in high school because you didn't make the soccer team. You're not just going to do nothing. Just go try it for a couple days. And his coach, I had to talk the coach into letting him on the team because they had already done their thing and had been practicing. And the first day after he ran, he beat all the JV kids having not trained. And the coach said, yeah, you can come back tomorrow. That's fine. And then he ended up making varsity his freshman year and varsity'd out all 4 years and was the best runner on their team his senior year. And it's something that I think he cherishes just as much as we do as parents, you know, a confidence booster to be good at something. So don't
Well, there it
discount
is.
cross country. Just
That's
you
right.
don't have to be the best runner in the world to enjoy it. It's probably one of the most positive places I've ever been. Nobody screams and yells at their kid because they're sucking it up that day. Everybody cheers for them.
Well, that's awesome. You heard it here first. Cross country, fantastic sport, and definitely a good opportunity to make good friends, be involved, and have the support of a whole community. So, but Andy, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. So, to you, our listeners, as we say every week, remember this: please, 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 love your family, love your community, love your country, and always, always catch your dreams, because you can do it. And like in cross country, you just work hard at it, you'll get better, and you'll be happy. So appreciate you tuning in, and you take care.
Throw it into a cage and make it our own. Yeah, yeah. Just got one shot. We're gonna take it. Gonna shoot that.